In 2002, the United States Congress authorized war against Iraq. President Trump, of course, has been highly critical of that decision.
I tell the truth about Iraq. I say the war was a disaster. We spent $2 trillion, lost thousands of lives. We should have never been there.
Even today, the 2002 authorization to use military force against Saddam Hussein is being used to justify the United States' continued presence in Iraq. The Iraqi government has asked us to leave. The American people fundamentally believe that after President Trump's success against ISIS, that our mission in Iraq should come to a conclusion and we should return home. So I thought it would be helpful to walk through the analysis in the 2002 authorization to use military force and to see whether or not these bases are still relevant today to our mission against terrorism. So the first four, the notion that there are chemical weapons stockpiles in Iraq, that there is a large-scale biological weapons program, that there are advanced nuclear weapons in Iraq, and that Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program threaten the United States, have all been disproven. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Those claims by the intelligence community were false. And so it would be ludicrous, even after learning that these things weren't true, to keep them in our law and in our foreign policy praxis, justifying continued U.S. involvement in Iraq. We now know them to be false. Now, we move then to the next two stated justifications to have military force in Iraq, and we see the claim that Iraq poses a continuing threat to the national security of the United States. Keep in mind, this is about Saddam Hussein's Iraq. I think more than a decade after Saddam Hussein has been killed, there is likely no continuing threat from his government to the United States. Here, in 2002, the Congress said that the current Iraqi regime will launch a surprise attack against the United States or its armed forces. That regime has not been in power for many, many years, and so we cannot possibly claim that the current Iraqi government would maintain that hostility against our country, and thus that basis is no longer legitimate. In 2002, the claim was made that members of Al-Qaeda are known to be in Iraq, and that is still true today. In 2002, we said that international terrorism had a foothold in Iraq, and that remains true today. And finally, of course, the United States and our president always have the ability to defend our country, defend our troops, and defend our allies, and they claim there is a continuing threat in Iraq. So here is the question. Are we really ready to go to war against every country where there's someone from Al-Qaeda present, where there is some nexus to international terrorism, and where there could be any threat to the United States? Do we really believe that that is the right standard to send America's bravest patriots into some godforsaken places for an untold period of time without a real clear purpose of the mission? I would argue that if this is the standard for U.S. military engagement, we would probably be at war in more than a dozen nations that have terrorists present and that could potentially be the breeding ground for terrorist activity. It's my position, and I believe the position of the Trump administration and certainly the Trump doctrine, that we are stronger when we build a more resilient homeland, that we are a better country when instead of spilling trillions of dollars in the Middle East, we actually secure our people, our economy, our manufacturing base. And it's my belief that this 2002 authorization to use military force has long outlived its utility and no longer is justified in our law. Let's make our country stronger. Let's stop spilling the blood of America's bravest patriots in Iraq and throughout the Middle East, and let's make sure that the treasure of our country goes to benefit our great citizens.